Hello, hello. All right, I'll get started with introductions as people trickle in. Welcome. Thank you all for joining us today for the October Tech Accelerator webinar. Our presentation topic this month is going to be accessibility in video gaming. This session is being recorded and will include picture-in-picture ASL translation as well as a full transcript on our website. That will be posted at disabilities.temple.edu. I will put that link in the chat for everyone as well. So all of our 18 webinars running from July of 2024 to December of 2025 are going to be available there for viewing. We do have 2 more live topics coming up after this month's. So November is going to be adaptive art, and then December will be a presentation highlighting assistive tech in rec therapy. We're going to have guest speakers for both of those topics, so we're looking forward to them. This series is a part of the Tech Accelerator program. So this is an initiative funded by the Office of Developmental Programs and the Office of Long-Term Living here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And that's made possible through funding from the American Rescue Plan Act. The Pennsylvania Tech Accelerator project includes 5 major focus areas: training and resources to build capacity for stakeholders, a readiness evaluation to develop tools for the successful adoption of remote supports and assistive tech, a statewide assessment to plan and benchmark technology-first systems change, a provider survey to assess technology awareness and resources among providers, and finally 2 technology summits, which were live events hosted in Philadelphia and Pittsburgh this past spring. So you can learn more about all of those fantastic projects on our website at disabilities.temple.edu using the link in the chat. All right, so let's get started to our topic for the day. My name is Caitlin. I am an assistive technology professional here at TechOWL, and I am also joined by my colleague Jen, one of our SLPs here on the TechOWL team today. We both have experience working with students who have complex access needs, such as switches and eye gaze. And we're both very enthusiastic about the notion of accessibility in general, and also the idea that play is the work of children, and these are transferable skills. So before we get started here, I wanted to see if anybody felt like sharing in the chat what your experience with gaming is, whether for yourself, for a child or a student or a consumer that you support. What are the benefits you see? Why do you game? This could include functional benefits, like practicing physical and cognitive skills that are going to translate to other tasks. It could include social benefits, building community and fostering supportive relationships. There are also potential mental and emotional benefits to gaming. So some people play video games in order to relax. Feel free to add your comments to the chat as we go along too. I don't want to rush anybody. So as we get started here today, we're going to first work on identifying what our interests are. So what kind of games do you or a person you support want to play? You might be looking at games from different genres like racing games, battle games, puzzles, sports, first-person shooters, sandbox games, etc. You also might be looking at specific franchises or platforms in your decision making. So if you know that you really, really want to be able to play Mario Kart, then you know it's going to have to be on a Nintendo platform. So that's going to influence which console and perhaps even which controllers you decide to use. The other thing we'll look at for our decision making about where to get started in games is what your support needs are. How might your disability and also your level of experience with gaming impact your setup? And your adaptive setup could also be impacted by the level of tech experience of caregivers or support personnel around you. Making sure we choose something that's going to be utilized and effectively utilized by everybody who's in charge of helping to set it up. If motor control is a concern for your disability, you'll want to start by identifying some access points at your body. And if motivation or frustration tolerance might be a challenge for you, we'll take that into consideration when looking at what kind of games we're going to play. So some examples of what does it look like to have games from different genres. So racing games, for example, what kind of skills in terms of reaction time, precision, or what kind of hardware, such as number of buttons, switches, triggers, joysticks, do these games typically require? Racing games typically do require a joystick of some sort to steer, access to at least two buttons for things like acceleration and drifting, plus a way to trigger traps or to use object boosts. So a lot of those features can be automated with accessibility settings depending on the game. Auto steering, for instance, is an option in Disney Speedstorm as well as in Mario Kart. And these types of games are also accommodating of different frustration tolerances. I like that Mario and Disney lift you back onto the track automatically if you fall, for example. And they tell you if you're going backwards. So overall, racing games are a nice intro point for lots of different people. They've got limited time-sensitive components. It's possible to play without a great deal of precision and to still have a very fun and rewarding experience. So asking these same questions of ourselves, what skills or hardware does this type of game require? If we look at side scroller games, so these are games that are kind of just a two-dimensional, one-directional playing field here. You're going to be able to do that with just arrow keys. You don't necessarily need a joystick. So you could have a switch array with switches representing up, down, left, right. Maybe you control those with your feet. Maybe you control those with your head or different body parts. Um, if it's a battle game, you will want to consider reaction time, but there are lots of side scrollers that are more adventure and exploration based. So those might not require fast reactions or much precision. And they also might have save points to avoid losing progress. So knowing how to take advantage of those. On the screen here, I have an example of the Brawlhalla video game on the left, and then a screenshot from a game called Ori and the Blind Forest on the right. And Ori and the Blind Forest is an adventure and exploration game. It does allow you to save your progress at any point, so you can restart from a saved point if a challenge becomes too difficult. Then finally, our third genre example is going to be first-person shooters. These are probably the most demanding type of gameplay to adapt. They do need complex controls, like access to two joysticks typically, because you want to be able to direct navigation as well as aim. These types of games are also more cognitively demanding because the game requires fast reaction time and sometimes high levels of precision. So the examples here are Apex Legends on the left. We have someone, it looks like they're reaching up to go down some sort of zip line or wire to the ground. And then on the right, we have a screenshot from Call of Duty and a first person point of view of someone aiming a gun. So a lot of you might not be gamers. I didn't see a whole lot of answers in the chat to our reasons for gaming questions. So what do we do if we don't know what kind of games you might be interested in, or what game has features that are going to be most conducive to your success? So there are tons of resources out there to help you identify options. And I'll be sharing a list of these types of databases at the end of the presentation, but also giving you a little sneak peek of them throughout. So here's a sneak peek of the Accessible Games database. And along the left side, there's a filtered search function. For this example, I've checked off the narrator box under visual features. So it's giving me a list of 17 games that provide narration for visually impaired players. And they include Assassin's Creed, Far Cry, Forza titles, Madden NFL is further down this list. And from here, I could narrow my search by selecting a specific platform that I want games to be compatible with. If I own an Xbox or a PlayStation, or I want to play on a PC, I could narrow my search down that way. I could also select a specific content rating, maybe if I were selecting a game for a child, for instance. Here's another such resource. This one is called the Family Gaming Database. And on the launch page, we get a list of tags, everything from what controls this game needs to whether or not it has specific in-game features like a tutorial or a practice arena. So if I click on one of these tags, for example, the one button tag to see games under that tag, these are things that can be played with a single button. So Mario Kart can be played with a single button. I've done that one before. You can take advantage of their auto accelerator and their steering assist features for that. The next game listed is called the Alto Collection. It looks like a side scroller where your character is a snowboarder. That sounds fun. And then the third on their list called OCO. It looks like some sort of colorful Pong type of platformer game. So I think that one is inherently a one-button game for all players, so no modifications required. But this is a list of 40 games. So again, you might need to filter by compatibility with the console that you intend to play on, or by age range, etc. So you could go up to the top and click on Show Filters in order to access all of those other additional settings. Okay, so we've identified some potential games we might be interested in or might be suitable for our needs, and we're excited to get started, to jump in, to start playing. What do we need? How do we play? So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the adaptive controllers that are available on the market, and then Jen's going to tell us a little bit about accessories for them and how to combine and position these things. The first and perhaps most flexible controller option is the Xbox Adaptive Controller. So this was released in 2018 and it's available for purchase at major retailers. You can get it from Best Buy, from the Microsoft stores, you can buy it at Target. This controller it's a flat rectangle with two large black buttons. There's also to the left a small directional arrow pad. But the most important feature is going to be the 3.5 millimeter switch ports that line all along the back of the controller. So here you can plug in external buttons to mimic every single function on a traditional Xbox gaming controller. You have your X, Y, B, A buttons, and now as external buttons, they can travel. So you can position them near any part of your body for easier access. This setup is highly customizable. It's all about the accessories. So the Xbox Adaptive Controller supports pretty much any type of switch. It also supports both USB and 3.5 millimeter joysticks. That makes it more flexible than any of the other adaptive controller options we're going to see. That's one reason why you might choose to use this controller, even if you don't own an Xbox. So even if you're using a Nintendo or a PlayStation console, it's possible to do that. So you just need an adapter in order to connect the Xbox controller to one of those other manufacturers' platforms. And we'll talk about how to do that after. I also wanted to mention that Xbox did release an adaptive joystick this year. So it brings all the functions of one half of the controller into your palm. So you've got the 4 buttons, the 2 triggers, and 1 joystick. In addition to holding it in your hand, another way you can use this adaptive joystick is you can mount it for use with your chin, for instance. So it does like all the other Xbox accessories. It has a threaded hole in the base so that you can screw it onto mounting equipment. So the controller, the joystick, and even the individual switches from Microsoft and from Xbox can all be mounted that way, which is pretty thoughtful design. All right, so the next accessible controller to come out after the Xbox is we now also have a PlayStation Access controller. This is a circular device with circumferential buttons, so almost like petals on a flower. And it's a really strong choice for one-handed gamers because you can access all of those pedals with the fingers and palm of one hand. It's also the only adaptive controller that comes with an integrated joystick. The downside to the PlayStation Access controller is that it only has 4 Switch inputs. So I would not recommend this one for someone who is primarily a Switch user. Great for one-handed gamers, though. And then finally, so our third major brand is Nintendo. This is the Nintendo Hori Flex controller. This one is not sold at major retailers, so it's only available for online purchase through one partner in the US, which would be Able Gamers. But similar to the Xbox adaptive controller, it offers those 3.5mm Switch inputs to mimic every function of the regular handheld gaming controller. However, it also provides the option of accessing those controls in the form of kind of mid-sized buttons built right into the base of the controller. So if someone were to just need buttons enlarged and not need them repositioned, this could be a decent controller option for them. Another strength is that this is the only console-based controller that can be paired with eye gaze. So you can plug a USB-based eye tracker into the Hori Flex and get eye gaze gaming with minimal setup. One thing to be aware of is that this controller is only comparable with a couple brands of joysticks, such as the Optima. So in that regard, it doesn't give us nearly as many options for accessories as the Xbox adaptive controller did. The same company does also make a couple other potentially useful pieces of hardware. One of them would be the fighting stick, which is an arcade style controller. So it doesn't have Switch inputs, but it does come with a joystick built in. And you might also consider things like their racing wheel or their flight controls as potentially adaptive hardware. So the racing wheel and the flight controls aren't typically or aren't specifically designed for disability, but the ergonomics of it, the different grip options, might happen to work better for some people than having to grip a joystick. Similarly, there are 2 third-party controllers by a company called 8BitDo that could have adaptive applications. So the first is the 8BitDo Lite SE, which is the Xbox wireless controller, and the second is the 8BitDo Arcade Stick, which can be used on a Nintendo Switch or on a computer. And both of those controllers include 2 programmable macro buttons. So this is in the form of an external switch on the Xbox version and in the form of the 2 top black buttons on the arcade stick version. So those are 2 buttons that can be programmed without any software, just by holding down a programming key on the controller to do whatever it is you need that button to do when you press it. So it could be a series of button presses. It could be to hold down something. It could be just to relocate a button that's difficult for you to reach otherwise. And finally, the last of our truly adaptive controllers is going to be the quad stick. So remember when we touched on the cognitive load and the level of physical access it's required for a first-person shooter game? So this is the adaptation you need for that. The quad stick is going to be the best option for anyone who wants to play those intensive joystick-dependent games, but doesn't have good wrist movement. So it uses a combination of a mouth-controlled joystick that you can move with your lips and a series of sip and puff straws built into the mouthpiece. This was designed for users who have limited upper extremity movement, maybe don't have any control of their arms at all. And the mouthpiece includes 3 holes that you can access individually or in groups and combinations. So it's like playing different notes on a harmonica. If you suck in air, it's going to trigger one function. If you blow out air, it's going to trigger a different function. So between 3 holes, 2 options of in or out, that's like the equivalent of having 20-something different buttons at your disposal. And someone can fact check me on that. It's been a while since I did factorials. If anyone in the chat is a high school math teacher, let us know. 3 button options, 2 in-out combinations. Math there comes out to 20 something. But as you can imagine, there is a bit of a learning curve to using this device. So the nature of being so customizable means it can take some programming to get it to work the way you want it to work. But it also means that you don't have to use it to its full potential. You could just use it as a mouse joystick and program one or two functions in with the sip and puffs, and that would get you pretty far in gaming. An additional accessory that's sometimes used in conjunction with the quad stick would be voice controls. There's a software called Voice Attack, which offers free programming of up to 20 commands. And this screenshot here shows programming of a test command. So when I say the word test, the computer will press and hold down the S key for 0.3 seconds and then release it. That's just an example, but you can imagine the possibilities here of making one-word commands for a whole series of different button combinations. It can hold things down, it can press multiple things in a row, press things simultaneously, and all just used with your voice. Honorable mention some other third-party controllers from manufacturers with an interest in accessibility. Blue Tip Gaming designs arcade-style controllers for Xbox. BioWave manufactures the Proteus controller, which is a modular device, so you can take it apart and put it back together in new shapes. You've got these 4 cubes here. You've got 2 that have joysticks and 2 that have the set of 4 button pads. And you can imagine if you were to take those apart and rearrange them into maybe a single vertical or horizontal line. It's like building Legos. You can combine them in whatever way fits your needs. And then finally, on the far right, we have an example of a custom one-handed controller from a company called Evil Controllers. I'm told that they were named that because they're one of the first big operations to modify controllers, and that was sketchy business in the gaming world because it's automatically assumed that mods are for cheating. But in this example, what we're seeing here is a one-handed controller. So they've wired an external thumbstick to replace the left joystick. And they've also moved the left triggers onto this right side grip. So this controller can be used by someone without a left hand. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Jen to tell us a little bit about other accessories to use with our controllers.
You. Hi, everyone. So we're going to talk a little bit about the different accessories you might want to explore that will allow you to better customize the adaptive controllers and ensure that they are accessible. So first, we're going to talk about switches. As discussed, the various controllers have switch ports, which allow you to connect a switch that you've mapped out for a specific gaming function. As Caitlin mentioned, you can use any 3.5mm switch. So you have switches, if you have switches already, you can use them. What you see in the picture on the screen is the Logitech Adaptive Gaming Kit. This is to give an example of a affordable gaming kit that has a lot of options available. It comes with 12 switches, different sizes, a Velcro pad for those switches, and labels so you can clearly see which switch does which function. And again, it's for a pretty reasonable price. If you're in the field, you know that switches are very expensive. So this is a really nice all-inclusive package. But again, any switches that you have available that have that 3.5mm should be compatible. We're going to talk a little bit about joysticks. So you can also connect an external joystick to your adaptive controllers. These are really helpful for racing games or games that require directional control. there are different options available on the market. You'll see it says Ultra Stick and Zigzag. They come with different grip styles, so you can find something that is comfortable for your hand and for you to rest on and utilize. Once you have your controller, your switches and joystick, if needed, you want to make sure that you look at how all of these are positioned around you and in front of you. This can vary depending on the game that you're playing in terms of the positioning of the switches. Different games utilize different functions and different buttons, so more frequently than others. So you want to take that into consideration. When setting up your controllers, a good rule of thumb is to prioritize controls that are the most essential for the game and most frequently used. You want to make sure that you can quickly access the controls that require fast reaction time. So if you're doing a game that has attacking or dodging and you want to respond quickly, you want to make sure that that is in a position that you're able to access as quickly as possible. You want to take into consideration where you'll be playing, so you can find the best surface to attach your controller and switches and joystick if needed. As previously mentioned, the Logitech Adaptive Gaming Kit comes with a pad to attach switches with Velcro, but you can also explore lap trays, or if you or an individual you're working with has a wheelchair that has a tray already attached, you can place the controller and accessories directly on that tray. Keep in mind, you might need additional accessories to help secure the controller, switches, and joystick. So Dysum is a great option for the controller itself, as well as the joystick. If you don't want to attach Velcro to it, you can use Velcro on your switches, or if you need kind of heavy duty Velcro, that exists as well. So you just want to take a look at what that best surface is to make gaming fun, accessible, and comfortable. And there are mounting options. I know Caitlin had talked a lot about this earlier, but you are able to mount the controller itself, which is great. If you don't want to or don't have a table or tray available, you can explore mounting options for the controller as well as the accessories. You want to make sure you're considering any other items you already have mounted when you're setting up the mounts for gaming specifically. You can explore different options that would meet your specific needs. And when we were talking about switches, again, we're looking at anywhere that your switch access point is, we can find a mounting position for it. So the one picture shows a head array, but again, you can mount things to be accessible at your knee, at your elbow, at your chin, H to T, anywhere that we want to have those things mounted.
Thank you, Jen. Okay, so we've talked a little bit now about features in the hardware of the game and accessories that we can buy to physically interact with it. Now we're going to talk about the other side, meaning features within the console or features within the accessibility menu of the game. So we'll start with Xbox. Xbox is probably the most reliable console in terms of accessibility over time. So their features, their devices tend to have continued support across editions and be backwards compatible as well. The first feature we'll talk about is controller assist. So this was formerly, not formally, that's a typo, called Copilot. And Copilot or controller assist is when you have two different controllers representing the same player or the same character in the game. So for instance, if I'm playing with some Switch user students who are maybe new to using their Switches, kind of more at a cause and effect level, they might be interested in making Uh, the objects move, making the bombs be thrown at someone in Mario Kart, or making the goose pick up the keys in the Untitled Goose Game. Or they might be interested in making the goose honk in the Untitled Goose Game. So they could be doing whatever button presses interest and motivate them. And meanwhile, a second person can be holding a standard controller to do the navigation to move the character. And both those controllers, the standard one and the adaptive controller, are going to be working collaboratively, so it becomes a multiplayer game. The second feature we'll look at within the console is button remapping. So this is when you go into the settings menu and you change the function of a button on the controller. We'll see what this looks like on the adaptive controller in just a moment, but this picture on this screen is showing what it looks like on a standard controller. So you can have a profile set in which maybe the A button is turned into the X button because for some reason that's easier for you to press in that location. And then there are settings for navigating the console itself. So screen reader, high contrast, magnification, etc. to help you with the setup of your game. Another feature and service I want to highlight is the Disability Answer Desk to get support from Microsoft. So sometimes when companies put out a product or a product that has accessibility features or adaptive applications to it, you call their customer support line and nobody on the other end understands those particular features or functions of the product. So that can be really frustrating, and Microsoft has solved this problem by having a dedicated customer service team specifically knowledgeable about accessibility features and about their adaptive products. So Microsoft has that disability answer desk. So here's what the button mapping looks like for the adaptive controller, which can be configured either right on the Xbox, or you can also configure it using the Xbox Accessories app on a computer. You'll see that there are lines pointing to each of the ports and keys on the adaptive controller, and there's a grayed out icon showing you what that key or port is currently programmed to do. And you can go ahead and click on that picture and change what it's programmed to do. So most frequently, we would want to be remapping the two large buttons. And then you might remap one of the smaller ports in order to reassign those A and B functions that you moved from large buttons. The same thing can be done on PlayStation and Nintendo as well. So customizing button assignments on PlayStation, you can do it with a standard controller, or you can do it with an adaptive controller. It also has that co-pilot feature. On PlayStation, they call it Assist Controller. So you can have an adaptive controller and a standard controller, or even two adaptive controllers programmed to control the same player. We used this recently in the community space for playing with the Astros playgrounds on PlayStation, because there's one feature that the adaptive controllers don't have, which is that touchpad that's built into PlayStation standard controllers. So you needed access to that touchpad in order to get through that particular game. So we had the access controller and the typical regular controller both controlling the same little Astro character so that we could make it through together. One option that PlayStation offers on their button remapping that the other consoles don't is a toggle feature. This is super helpful for things like acceleration in a racing game. So instead of having to hold down the trigger that controls acceleration in order to keep going, you can press it once, it'll be toggled on, and then you press it again to toggle it off when you're done with it. So that's very helpful to have that as a controller setting and not have to rely on the game offering that as an in-game setting. And then again, there are accessibility settings such as screen reader, high contrast settings, magnification, captions, etc. for navigating within the console itself. Okay, looking at the accessibility settings in Nintendo. So they do have button mapping. However, you have to use a computer in order to remap the adaptive controller. So PlayStation and Xbox, you can remap all the controllers right on the console. Nintendo, you can only remap the traditional standard Joy-Cons or Nintendo controllers on the console. You have to connect it to a computer in order to remap the adaptive controller. It does have screen reader, high contrast, magnification, etc. under accessibility settings in the console. Overall, Nintendo doesn't have a lot of accessibility support, but the nature of the games on this platform, it has a lot of arcade style games, for instance, means that it still tends to be a strong contender for a lot of adaptive gamers. There are plenty of adaptive gamers that prefer and choose Nintendo as a platform, particularly, beginning gamers or people who are into those arcade style games or looking for, you know, something that only Nintendo offers. Well, another thing I wanted to point out about the Nintendo is with the latest edition of the Nintendo Switch, you now can plug the adaptive controller right into the handheld console without having to attach it to a television. So I think we're going to see a lot more uptake of adaptive controller use on this platform now that that's an option that you can use the handheld. All right, so I mentioned before that many of these controllers can be used on competitors' consoles. So you could plug in an Xbox adaptive controller to a PlayStation, for example. You just need to have the right adapter. So I'm going to take a moment here to highlight another one of those resource databases that I will be linking to at the end of the presentation. So this is Gaming Readapted, a website run by Drew Reddypenning. He is an assistive technology professional and a biomedical engineer who has a lot of experience working in rehab contexts. And he gives walkthroughs of various controllers, including guides to using adapters. So here is an illustration of that feature. If we go to the Adapters tab at the top of the Gaming Readapted website, we see the Controller Connect tool. And then here it's going to list in drop-down menus the names of each console that we might want to connect, either the Quad Stick, the Xbox Adaptive Controller, or the PlayStation Access Controller 2. So we have the name of the controller at the top of the column, and then links to each console type. For example, if we wanted to connect an Xbox Adaptive Controller to a PlayStation 5 console, how would I do that? So I'll click the PlayStation 5 link under Xbox Adaptive Controller. And it shows me one option is to use a Brook adapter. So that gives me a video of how to do that, as well as giving me a link of where I could purchase that kind of adapter. And if we scroll down more, we see that we also have a second option called the PS5 Mate. So we can get some information about what accessories that adapter is compatible with. And if we think we might use some of those other tools down the road, such as the quad stick, maybe we go with an adapter that can handle that second accessory as well. So it gives us all the information we might need in order to make a decision about what types of adapters to buy. All right, let's see, we've learned about button mapping. We saw some console accessibility settings. But our gameplay experience is also going to depend upon the accessibility features for the individual game. So in-game settings cover everything from color contrast to captions. And some of those settings, by the way, are being used by non-disabled gamers as well. So curb cut effect, right? Increasing ease of access is good for everyone. You have competitive Fortnite players out there using those on-screen visual cues for audio effects to tell them what direction the sound's coming from. Or changing their color palette to high contrast because research supposedly says that our brains react fastest to the color yellow. So they're looking for that competitive advantage of processing alert faster than their opponent. But some other examples of options to look for in games. In racing games, you might have auto acceleration or steering assist features. You can find those in Mario Kart for sure and in Disney Speedstorm. In first-person shooter games, look for options like auto reloading, single stick movement, or swap sticks while aimed so that you can use the joystick for aiming and then switch it back automatically to navigation. Those are features available in games like The Last of Us and Gears 5. Then in role-playing and battle games and lots of other, even some of the puzzle and adventure games, you'll have adjustable difficulty level. So you can choose to play the game on easy. That's available in games like Baldur's Gate, Elder Scrolls, and Forza. And then finally, in puzzle and adventure games, some of the options to look for might be things like audio panning or colorblind mode. I wanted to highlight here that there is an entire genre, if you will, of games that are specifically audio games. So they have a main output of sound rather than graphics. Two examples of this are The Veil, Shadow of the Crown, and a game called Ear Monsters. So the premise of The Veil is that the main character is blind, so there are therefore no visuals in the game. Instead, you're using directional sound. For example, if the next task on my adventure requires a blacksmith, then I need to go into the town square and listen for the sound of the hammer. I can tell when wearing headphones which direction that sound is coming from and walk that way. Similarly, the premise of ear monsters is that monsters from a parallel dimension are invisible when they wormhole into our universe. So we can't see the monsters, but we can hear them. I haven't played this one yet, but I know that similar games like Audio Pong sometimes use the frequency of the sound as well as the volume in order to indicate proximity. So in both of these games, all players must rely on their sound, not their vision, to complete the goals. So it's a cool example of inclusivity without any accommodations. That sighted and blind players are just automatically on an even playing field here. All right, demonstrations and acquisition. Where can we get our hands on trying out or learning more about some of these games, some of these devices? You might be surprised to learn that there are opportunities for in-person gaming potentially near you. So the first photo on the left here is from the Ingalls Innovation Center here in Philadelphia. They do one-to-one demos as well as community events, even in some cases home visits to help players set up their assistive technology needs. The picture on the right is from Abilities in Motion. They are the Center for Independent Living out in Berks County. They have an esports and gaming center that's primarily PC based. They hold community events and they also hold tournaments there. I was able to go to one of their tournaments over the summer. It was a lot of fun. And they also have pay per hour individual gaming sessions. Of course, TechOWL does have our own community space here in Philadelphia as well. Our community space has all three consoles. We have the Xbox, PlayStation, and the Nintendo, along with the adaptive controllers for each and other accessories like switches and various styles of joystick for people to try. If you live in Pennsylvania, you can also try many of those materials from the comfort of your own home by borrowing them through TechOWL's Lending Library, which is a free online service available to anyone who lives in Pennsylvania. Items are mailed right to your home to try for free with a return shipping label prepaid in the box. So if you don't know where in-person services might be near you, first of all, you can ask your local AT ACT program for ideas, but also you can consider some online play options. So we have two organizations here. The first is Special Effect. They host multiplayer online games for eye gaze and Switch users. And then the second is the Adaptive Esports Tournaments series. Adaptive Esports Tournaments is a collaboration between the charity Able Gamers and Adaptive Action Sports, which is sponsored by Logitech. So these are competitive, paid esports tournaments that just happen to be disabled players. Okay, here is that promised additional resources slide. Other places you can go for support. You can submit a peer support request at the Able Gamers website. You can ask your question or browse other people's ideas and experiences on Discord and Reddit in the disabled gamers communities. And you can look up how-to videos and other educational resources on things like how to choose a controller or a game on the Gaming Readapted website. In addition to those resources, we have a list of game review sites, Accessible Games Database, Can I Play That?, Game Accessibility Nexus, Game Access Knowledge Base, and the Family Gaming Database. These are places you can go to filter by keyword, by accessibility feature, by content type, to learn about what games might interest you and meet your access needs. Now, whenever I present on any type of assistive technology, I know I'm going to get questions on how to buy things because assistive tech is expensive. You know, the Xbox adaptive controller costs $100 plus another 100 for the Switch kit, maybe another $30 if you need a joystick. If you need a tray or a mount, that's more. So the typical official providers like medical or educational or vocational entities are not super likely to fund your gaming equipment. An exception would be if you can make it cross over from gaming to other computer-related tasks. And say, you know, for example, the quad stick, which runs upwards of $500 now, can give you access to a computer. So things like sending emails, attending online classes or meetings, completing data entry tasks, I don't know, being a computer programmer. The sky's the limit. So the point being, if you can make the case that your computer equipment is good for something other than gaming, then do it. You might be able to get it funded that way. Otherwise, there are charitable foundations and grassroots networks, places such as Able Gamers, which helps provide adaptive equipment to people who need it. You can also get free 3D printed controller modifications from the Controller Project. That would do things like building up a joystick to be larger, or installing a lever to be able to reach a trigger with the opposite hand. A number of grants for assistive technology are happy to fund rec and leisure items. You can get information about grants that you might qualify for, as well as any loan programs that exist in your state by contacting your Assistive Technology Act program. So most states have an alternative financing program. Sometimes it's run directly within the AT Act program's other offerings. And sometimes, such as here in Pennsylvania, it's run by a third party. Like we have the Pennsylvania Assistive Technology Foundation, PATF, to offer zero interest or low interest loans and payment assistance. All right, before I pause for questions here, I do have an opportunity for you all to give us feedback about this presentation, about topics you hope to see in future presentations, and help give us the data we need in order to keep offering programming like this. I will put that link in the chat as well, so if you're able to take a moment to fill out our survey, we would appreciate it. And then I'm also going to take questions from the audience.